Siddhartha Gautama, the spiritual king who stepped out of history. About 2.5 millennia ago in northern India, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama walked away from royal comfort to answer one question: why is life filled with suffering? For 6 years, he lived as a wandering ascetic, nearly starving, before discovering what he called the middle way, a balance between indulgence and denial. Under a fig tree at Bodh Gaya, he reached enlightenment and became the Buddha, the awakened one. For the next 45 years, he traveled through the Ganges Valley teaching compassion, mindfulness, and liberation from desire. But it's how he left the world that turned him into a mystery. Around 483 BCE in Kushinagar, he calmly told his followers his end was near. After eating a humble meal, he lay down on his right side beneath twin sal trees and entered deep meditation. Witnesses said he slipped into parinirvana, complete release from the cycle of birth and death. There was no drama, no tomb, no trace, only serenity. Afterwards, several regions claimed his relics. 8 stupas were said to hold fragments of his body, but his burial site was never conclusively identified. In Ashoka's time, centuries later, those relics were supposedly scattered even wider. And now almost every Buddhist land claims a piece. His physical exit became part of his message. Nothing permanent, not even a teacher. The man who abandoned luxury, then power, finally abandoned existence itself, leaving behind a faith followed today by more than 500 million people, and a disappearance that feels less like loss and more like transcendence.
Pharaoh Akhenaten, the king who tried to erase the gods and was erased himself. More than 3,300 years ago, Egypt's mighty pharaoh Amenhotep IV made a decision that shook an empire built on gods. Around 1348 BCE, he did the unthinkable. He rejected Egypt's crowded pantheon, declared the sun disk Aten as the one true deity, and renamed himself Akhenaten, servant of Aten. He built a brand new capital, Akhetaten, modern Amarna, glowing with open courtyards for solar worship. His art changed completely. Elongated heads, intimate family scenes, no heroic poses. It was the first monotheistic experiment in recorded history. But priests of Amun and the army he'd neglected turned against him. Trade shrank, temples emptied, and his reforms angered almost everyone kept alive by the old order. Then, sometime around 1336 BCE, Akhenaten vanished from the record. Some say he died naturally and was buried in his desert city. Others whisper coup or religious purge. His tomb was found empty, no mummy, no confirming inscription. Within a few years, even his name was chiseled out of monuments. Egypt returned to its traditional gods, restoring his young successor, Tutankhamun, to orthodoxy. For over 3,000 years, the heretic king was a ghost in history, until archaeologists rediscovered Amarna in the 1800s. Today, Akhenaten looks less like a mad heretic and more like a visionary who aimed at spiritual revolution centuries before it was imaginable, and became the only pharaoh effectively deleted by his own civilization.
Cyrus II of Persia rose in the mid-6th century BCE from a cluster of tribes in the Iranian plateau to become one of history's first true world conquerors. In less than 30 years, he overthrew the Medes, seized Lydia in Asia Minor, captured Babylon without destroying it, and created an empire stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley. Unusually for his age, he ruled with tolerance, returning exiled peoples home, rebuilding temples, and issuing the famous Cyrus Cylinder, sometimes called the first human rights charter. Then, around 530 BCE, Cyrus led a campaign against steppe nomads called the Massagentai. Greek historians claim he died in battle. Others say he fell to an arrow or was decapitated by their queen Tomaris, who allegedly dipped his head in blood for revenge. Yet Persian sources never confirmed any of it. His supposed tomb at Pasargadae still stands, a plain stone chamber holding a single empty sarcophagus. No body, no royal remains. That absence only magnified the myth. To Persians, he became the model of the just ruler. To later empires, proof that leadership could conquer and still forgive. But for archaeologists, he remains half-present, his empire mapped across continents, while the man himself simply vanishes between one campaign and eternity.
Ambiorix, the rebel who humbled Rome and left no trace. In 54 BCE, Julius Caesar was deep in his conquest of Gaul when he met one of his most elusive enemies, Ambiorix, leader of the Eburones, a small Belgic tribe in what's now Belgium. Caesar's legions demanded food and loyalty. Ambiorix appeared friendly, warning them of a false threat. When they marched out to relocate, his warriors ambushed them in a snowy valley, wiping out more than 7,000 Romans, one of Caesar's greatest humiliations. Caesar retaliated with fury, ordering the total destruction of Ambiorix's people. Village after village burned, the Eburones hunted like animals. Yet their leader was never captured. Roman reports say he crossed the Rhine River with a few companions and vanished. Some believed German tribes sheltered him, others thought he died wandering beyond Rome's reach. For centuries, nothing more was known. His survival became legend, his escape a symbol of defiance. Today he stands in bronze in the Belgian city of Tongeren, sword raised, the inscription reading simply, "Freedom." The man who could make Caesar rage still has no grave, only a story that outlived the empire he fought.
An Lushan, the general who nearly toppled a dynasty and then vanished into doubt. In the mid-700s CE, the Tang dynasty was China's golden age, wealthy, artistic, cosmopolitan. At its peak rose An Lushan, a half-Sogdian, half-Turkic frontier general, favored by Emperor Huizong. He commanded over 150,000 troops guarding China's northeast, and for years played the loyal servant while quietly gathering power. In 755 CE, claiming corruption at court, he rebelled. His uprising erupted into one of the deadliest wars in human history. Historians estimate up to 35 million deaths, roughly 1/6 of the world's population then alive. An captured both Luoyang and Chang'an, declared himself emperor of a rival Yan dynasty, and seemed unstoppable. But after years of chaos and starvation, illness and paranoia set in. By 757 CE, he vanished from the story's center. Official Tang records say his son assassinated him during a fit of madness, the blind, obese rebel strangled in his bath. Yet no verified grave or body was ever found, and later sources hint the account was propaganda to close a nightmare chapter quickly. The dynasty survived, but shattered. Tang China never regained its early splendor. An Lushan's disappearance left an empire haunted by silence. One man's ambition had nearly undone a civilization, and even his death refused to offer closure. No mausoleum, no end. Just the lingering echo of footsteps that shook the world.
Prester John, the imaginary king the world refused to stop looking for. In the 12th century, a letter began circulating across Europe, supposedly written by a mighty Christian monarch ruling somewhere in the Indies. He called himself Prester John, priest and king of a fabulously wealthy realm filled with rivers of gold, monsters tamed by faith, and armies ready to aid the Crusaders. His letter promised that if Europe could only find his kingdom, Christendom would finally crush Islam and reclaim the Holy Land. The story spread like wildfire. For 400 years, explorers, merchants, and popes believed he was real. Some said he ruled India. Others put him in Central Asia amid the Mongols. When that failed, Portugal dispatched expeditions down Africa's coast to locate him, belief fueling the entire age of exploration. Vasco da Gama's route to India and the Portuguese invasion of Ethiopia both began as quests for Prester John. But he never existed. The letters were medieval propaganda, perhaps forged to inspire unity and courage during the Crusades. Over time, the Phantom King's map moved farther and farther from reality until he simply disappeared, swallowed by myth and mistaken geography. And yet, his absence changed history. Prester John's imagined invitation pulled Europeans across oceans and continents. The greatest missing ruler of all time may never have breathed, but his shadow still reaches every globe, proof that a vanished hope can be stronger than any living king.
Prince Cem Sultan, the Ottoman heir the world kept prisoner and then lost. Cem Sultan was born in 1459, the ambitious younger son of the legendary Mehmed the Conqueror. When Mehmed died in 1481, the Ottoman Empire trembled. Two brothers, Cem and Bayezid, raced to claim the throne. Cem lost by mere days. His forces were crushed near Bursa, his one escape route, exile. He fled first to the Mamluks in Egypt, then sought safety with the Knights Hospitaller on Rhodes. That decision sealed his fate. The Knights realized how valuable a spare Ottoman sultan could be. For 13 years, Cem was shuttled between Rhodes, France, and Italy, used as leverage in European politics. Popes paraded him like a prisoner guest. Monarchs dreamed of launching a crusade with him as puppet emperor. Yet Bayezid paid huge bribes to keep him confined, but alive, fearing his return would spark a rebellion. In 1495, Pope Alexander VI, Borgia, summoned Cem to his court to join a proposed crusade. But before it began, the prince died suddenly at age 36. Officially, illness. Rumors said poison, from the very envoys paid by his brother. Bayezid warmly thanked the pope and sent gifts. Cem's body was mummified and wandered Europe for years before the Ottomans finally reclaimed it for burial. The man who might have ruled the world's greatest empire became a symbol of exile, alive, visible, yet powerless. Even his death carries doubt, a royal life reduced to rumor and ransom, a literal heir without a homeland.
Emperor Huizong, the artist who lost an empire and faded into captivity. In the early 12th century, Emperor Huizong of the Song dynasty ruled the most sophisticated nation on earth. He was a master painter, poet, calligrapher, and musician, a ruler who saw beauty as divine order. But while he obsessed over art and ceremony, the northern Jurchen tribes built armies beyond the Great Wall. In 1127, they struck. The invaders stormed Kaifeng, sacked the capital, and captured both Huizong and his son. It ended what history calls the Jingkong Incident, one of China's deepest humiliations. Huizong was compelled to abdicate, stripped of titles, and deported north to Manchuria. Reports said he lived there quietly, painting and writing poems of regret. Then, silence. No record of his death, and the burial listed in chronicles produced no confirmed remains. Some said he was executed, others that he died in peace as a Buddhist recluse. The Southern Song rebuilt the dynasty farther south, turning his name into a cautionary emblem of culture replacing vigilance. Yet his supposed art kept appearing for centuries, unsigned, mysterious. Huizong never re-entered history, and maybe that's the most fitting ending for a poet-emperor, fading like ink in the rain, his glory surviving only in brushstrokes too graceful to die.
King Sebastian I of Portugal, the boy king who disappeared into prophecy. Sebastian ascended Portugal's throne in 1557 at only 3 years old. Handsome, devout, and obsessed with crusading legend, he grew convinced destiny called him to spread Christianity into North Africa. At 24, against every advisor's warning, he led 17,000 men across the sea to invade Morocco in 1578. At the Battle of Alcácer Quibir, everything collapsed. The heat, poor planning, and triple-sized Moroccan force annihilated the Portuguese line. The king charged into the melee and was never seen again. No body, no witnesses, no crown. With him vanished nearly Portugal's entire nobility. His death left a childless throne, pushing the country under Spanish rule for 60 years. But the mystery kept him alive. Within a decade, imposters claiming to be Sebastian appeared across Europe. Crowds believed. A cult, Sebastianism, formed, preaching that the hidden king would return to restore Portugal's glory. Centuries later, church hymns still spoke of that waiting. Whether Sebastian drowned in chaos or escaped in disguise, he became less a monarch than an idea,
the vanished ruler whose absence kept hope breathing in a conquered nation.
Tsar Alexander I, the emperor who defeated Napoleon and may have faked his own death. Alexander I of Russia was born into glittering privilege in 1777 and crowned at just 23 after his father's murder, an event some suspected he quietly allowed. Brilliant, moody, and unpredictable, he spent his life torn between ambition and guilt. Early in his reign, he fought Napoleon, lost horribly at Austerlitz, then turned ally, then enemy again, finally leading the armies that crushed France in 1812. Europe hailed him as the savior of the continent. Yet victory didn't calm him. After years of congresses and endless wars, Alexander grew intensely religious, speaking of renouncing power for a humble life. In 1825, during a journey to southern Russia, he suddenly fell ill with fever in the city of Taganrog. Within days, he was pronounced dead. But no one outside a handful of courtiers ever saw the body clearly. His coffin was sealed almost immediately and guarded against viewing. Soon whispers arose. The Tsar had staged his death, abandoning the throne to live as a wandering hermit named Fyodor Kuzmich in distant Siberia. Locals later described the old man's aristocratic manners, his fluent French, and his deep knowledge of court life. When he died in 1864, pilgrims built a shrine over his grave. Modern DNA tests have never conclusively linked the two men, leaving Russia with a mystery equal parts faith and guilt. Whether Alexander I died at 48 or lived decades disguised as a saint, his story closes like his reign began, in shadows, halfway between redemption and regret. A ruler powerful enough to conquer Napoleon, yet perhaps too weary to bear his own crown.
Empress Carlotta, the queen who lost a crown and her mind. Born Charlotte of Belgium in 1840, Carlotta married Archduke Maximilian of Austria, hoping for a life of art and prestige. Instead, politics hurled them into tragedy. In 1864, backed by Napoleon III and conservative Mexican elites, Maximilian accepted a foreign crown in a divided Mexico. Carlotta became empress at 23, elegant and intelligent, but unaware she'd stepped into a powder keg. Soon, French troops, the empire's backbone, were recalled to Europe. Revolution spread. Carlotta sailed to Europe in 1866 to beg Napoleon III and the Pope for help. She was turned away from one court after another. Exhausted and humiliated, she suffered a total mental collapse in Rome, convinced assassins were poisoning her food. When Maximilian was executed by firing squad the following year, Carlotta didn't even comprehend the news. She lived on for almost 60 years, first hidden in an Italian villa, later in isolation at Belgium's Castle of Bouchot. Curtains stayed drawn so she wouldn't realize decades had passed. To the world, she was already a ghost, a queen still breathing, her mind trapped on the day her empire died. Carlotta's life became Europe's longest royal disappearance, a throne left empty and a soul lost in exile.
Sebastian Lerdo de Tejada, the president who vanished between revolutions. Once Mexico's Supreme Court chief, Lerdo de Tejada assumed the presidency after Benito Juárez's death in 1872. Scholarly and restrained, he continued Juárez's liberal reforms, curbing church power and expanding education. But Mexico wanted a soldier, not a jurist. General Porfirio Diaz accused him of dictatorship and launched the Tuxtepec Rebellion in 1876. Lerdo fled Mexico City with loyalists and boarded a steamer north, bound for exile in New York. After the ship left Veracruz, reports blur. Some witnesses claimed typhoons damaged it. Others said he disembarked in Cuba or Panama. The vessel's logs later vanished. No verified landing record exists. He simply disappears from history around 1879. Rumors persisted that he lived quietly under another name in Central America, Others believed Diaz's agents ensured he never reached shore. Without a confirmed death, Lerdo became another haunting gap in a century where revolutions devoured their creators. His missing body symbolized Mexico's endless struggle between idealism and force. The reformer erased mid-journey, leaving only unanswered paperwork where a president used to be.
Raoul Wallenberg, the diplomat who saved tens of thousands and then disappeared behind Soviet walls. Born in 1912 into a wealthy Swedish family of bankers and diplomats, Raoul Wallenberg was 32 when World War II pulled his calm intellect into the heart of terror. In 1944, as Nazi forces prepared to deport Hungary's Jews to Auschwitz, Wallenberg went to Budapest as part of Sweden's diplomatic mission. In just 6 months, he created shelters, issued handmade Swedish protective passports, and bribed, threatened, and outwitted the Gestapo to rescue over 100,000 people from the camps. Witnesses said he'd drive through streets under bombardment, waving a Swedish flag, shouting orders backed by sheer conviction. When the Red Army liberated Budapest in January 1945, Wallenberg was last seen heading to meet Soviet commanders, promising to plan post-war relief. He never returned. Days later, the Soviets announced they had taken him for questioning. After that, silence. For years, Moscow denied knowledge, then claimed he died of a heart attack in prison in 1947. Yet dozens of former inmates reported meeting a cultured foreign diplomat long after that date. Sweden pressed, the US declassified files, and Russia opened and quickly closed archives. No grave, no body, no proof. Wallenberg was declared dead only in 2016 at 104, legally ending but never solving his case. He remains one of the 20th century's purest enigmas, a man who saved lives by the thousands only to vanish inside the gray machinery he'd believed was liberation itself. His story proves that heroism can survive death, even when the hero himself is consumed by secrecy.
Subhas Chandra Bose, the rebel who fought for India and vanished in fire and rumor. Subhas Chandra Bose, born in 1897 in Cuttack, India, was a brilliant student who became one of the fiercest voices against British rule. Unlike Gandhi's path of non-violence, Bose believed only armed struggle would free his country. During World War II, he fled house arrest, slipping through Afghanistan and the Soviet Union before reaching Germany, where he sought Axis help against the British Empire. Later, he marched to Japan, forming the Indian National Army with captured Indian soldiers and declared the creation of a free Indian government in exile. In August 1945, as Japan surrendered, Bose boarded a Japanese bomber bound for Manchuria. Witnesses claimed the plane crashed on takeoff in Taiwan, bursting into flames. Bose was said to have suffered fatal burns and died hours later. His ashes, taken to Tokyo's Renkoji Temple, still rest there today, but no photographic proof or official autopsy ever surfaced. Almost immediately, stories spread that he'd escaped to the Soviet Union or re-entered India disguised, waiting for the right moment to return. Over the decades, multiple commissions investigated. None produced conclusive evidence, and rumors of Netaji's survival persisted. Some claimed secret meetings, others saw him as a wandering monk. Bose's disappearance left India balanced between admiration and longing. Was he a martyr of independence or a survivor in exile? No one can say. What remains certain is the fire he lit, a conviction that freedom's struggle must sometimes vanish into mystery to survive persecution. Even without a grave, Bose's absence became its own legend of resistance.
Michael Rockefeller, the heir who vanished at the edge of the world. In 1961, Michael Clark Rockefeller, 23-year-old son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller and grandson of one of America's richest men, set out not for Wall Street but for the swamps of Dutch New Guinea. A Harvard anthropology graduate, he was obsessed with documenting and collecting tribal art for a future museum, sculptures from the Asmat people, a culture renowned for headhunting and intricate wood-carving rituals. On November 17, 1961, after his catamaran overturned off the southern coast, Rockefeller and his companion drifted for 2 days. His partner was rescued, but Michael strapped on improvised floats and swam for shore, about 10 kilometers away, and disappeared. Despite an enormous search involving aircraft, ships, and hundreds of locals, no trace was found. Dutch officials claimed he likely drowned or was taken by sharks. Yet within days, rumors spread that he had safely reached land and met a violent end at the hands of villagers seeking revenge for a past police raid. Years later, journalists, missionaries, and adventurers chased every version: the murder story, the voluntary exile theory, even whispers that he joined the tribe. None were proven. His father mounted personal expeditions and offered large rewards. Nothing credible surfaced. Today, Michael Rockefeller remains one of the 20th century's most haunting vanishings, a symbol of privilege colliding with mystery. Whether the sea swallowed him or the jungle claimed him, his absence still draws explorers 50 years later, each one chasing what the world's wealthiest family could never buy: the truth of where their son went when civilization ended at a tropical horizon.